Greetings fellow Decepticons, Soundblaster1987 here with another animation review mini vlog. Today, continuing with the early 2000s anime boom with the Transformers franchise, I'll be covering Transformers Armada, one of the first Transformers series that I ever collected the toys for growing up, and one that I still enjoy revisiting the cartoon for nowadays, in addition to back collecting the original Armada molds in comparison to the new legacy ones and such that have come out. So, for those who don't know, Transformers Armada was the first, or one of the first, collaborations between Hasbro and America and Takara-Tomy in Japan to co-produce an animated series and toy line, due to the fact that the Car Robots 2000 / Robots in Disguise 2001 toy line wasn't quite so popular because of the way that it was handled mostly in Japan and then translated to America later on. So, as the first of the Unicron Trilogy trio of toy lines and cartoons, with a few tie-in comic books and such here and there, Armada was co-produced between between Takara and Hasbro, and like I say, it's of a early 2000s anime style, similar to the likes of Naruto, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Beyblade, Bakugan, Pokemon, Digimon, all that kind of stuff. So, the main story of the Armada cartoon is that a smaller race of Transformers called the Minicons are sick and tired of being stuck in the middle of the Autobot-Decepticon war, because the Autobots are fighting for the Minicons to live peacefully among them on Cybertron, while occasionally teaming up consensually to form power boosts and such like, whereas the Decepticons want to enslave them as a forced power boost. And so the Autobots and Decepticons don't agree morality-wise, as they ever do, and so the war broke out. The Minicons, being sick and tired of being piggy in the middle of the whole thing, decided to flee Cybertron altogether to get away from the fighting, but ended up being pursued across the galaxy by both sides. After following a wormhole to Earth, the Minicon ship crash-landed on Earth's moon, with one of the front spikes of the ship ricocheting off the moon's surface and landing on Earth itself, forming the basis for the sunken city of Atlantis by the looks of things from what I've seen of the cartoon recently. Most of the Minicons in this series start out in their green pentagonal, flat stasis panel forms, the first of which was discovered by the Autobots' human allies, Rad, Carlos and Alexis, who ended up teaming up with the Autobots after they first brought the Minicon Highwire online. Highwire is the only Minicon in the entire series with a consistent ability to speak English, or in the Takara version Japanese, as opposed to the other Minicons that just speak in electronic beeping and whirring noises similar to R2-D2 from Star Wars. So yes, the first Autobots to arrive on the scene in the first episode were Optimus Prime, Hotshot and Red Alert, with more to follow later on in the series, while the first Decepticons on the scene were Megatron, Starscream, Demolisher and Cyclonus. There were quite a few different names between America and Japan for some of these, which I'll get to later, but over the course of the series, not only did many more Minicons show up, some of which would become the individual partners of specific larger Transformer characters, but others were part of a select trio of Minicons with a similar vehicle aesthetic, or in some cases the ability to combine into a weapon, such as the Star Saber, Skyboom Shield and Requiem Blaster, which again I'll touch on later. But yes, throughout the course of the series we got more Transformers, full-size Cybertronian characters popping up, as well as a few flashback scenes on Cybertron that use erroneous recoloured character models from a 1980s G1 cartoon, such as Armada's version of Sentinel Minor or Sentinel Prime that was actually just a blue and orange version of G1 Pretender Sure Shot. Not Pretender, Target Master rather, sorry. So, in addition to the previous Autobots that I've mentioned before, we also get, later on in the series, Smokescreen, Scavenger, Blur, Jetfire, Sideswipe, and eventually, Smokescreen gets rebuilt into Hoist after an incident that went wrong in the Autobots headquarters, which I'll touch on later. The Decepticon ranks, on the other hand, increase even further with Thrust, Tidal Wave and Sideways. And also Hotshot's former best friend Wheeljack, who ended up getting stuck in a fire under some burning rubble on Cybertron, and Hotshot was prevented from rescuing him, so Megatron stepped in instead, thus causing Wheeljack to join the Decepticons. We don't see many turncoat Autobots in this franchise, but it's nice to see one here and there. And of course the G1 Sideswipe style design for Wheeljack's toy was also the basis for the Shattered Glass Sideswipe from the BotCon 2008 exclusives as well, which I'll come back to in a separate video about the history of the Shattered Glass franchise. But anyway, Sideways and Frost turned out to be playing both sides off against each other as they were both servants of Unicron. For those who don't know, Unicron is the massive planet that eats other planets from a 1986 Transformers movie that transforms into a gigantic grey and orange sort of satanic-looking robot with big skeletal wings formed for a planetary ring around the alternate mode. Armada, Energon and Cybertron were all named the Unicron Trilogy collectively because of the role that Unicron and his influence has on each series. In Armada it was because Unicron was the creator of the Minicons, as well as Sideways and Frost. In Energon it was because Unicron was being resurrected from having been destroyed at the end of Armada, and in Cybertron it was because the second destruction of Unicron at the end of Energon created a black hole in orbit of Cybertron that was threatening to destroy the entire universe. I've already touched on the Cybertron cartoon in a previous video, which is linked down below. I'll also be covering Energon in a separate video down below, which will also be linked below once I get it uploaded. So, as far as the voice cast for this series is concerned, Gary Chalk as Optimus Prime and David Kay as Megatron reprise their roles from Beast Wars and will continue to do so throughout the Unicron Trilogy. And this is also another time where Optimus Prime has a super mode by combining with parts of his own vehicle trailer and such. In this case, it's basically the cab becomes the entire upper body and arms, while the trailer explodes into a pair of trousers. This is where the basis for the Transformers Energon Autobots power linking pairs combo comes from. So, basically, the same basis of Optimus Prime's transformation into an upper body for a super mode can be applied to almost every Autobot from Energon, with the exception of Landmine, Wing Saber, Omega Supreme and Bulkhead, because they have their own combination techniques going on. I'll cover that in more detail when I get to Energon in a separate video. But anyway, this is also the first appearance of the Dobson Brothers trio in the Transformers franchise. Paul Dobson was the voice of Sideways in Transformers Armada, and would also later go on to voice Landmine in Transformers Cybertron. Michael Dobson was the voice of Starscream, and he's yet another of the many Starscream voice actors to share the actor with Cobra Commander. That's another video I've got to make at some point, the shared roles of Starscream and Cobra Commander between voice acting. Then Brian Dobson was the voice of Red Alert in Transformers Armada, a role he would return to in the Cybertron series in 2005. I can't remember offhand the names of the other voice actors throughout the series, but I'll leave a link in the description below to some of them, if I can remember in time anyway, when doing the editing and uploading for this video. So, yes, the basic plot of the series is that a trio of human kids, Brad, Alexis and Carlos, end up exploring a hidden cave somewhere. They discover the first of the Minicons, Highwire. Then Optimus Prime and Megatron both chase after them. Optimus Prime teams up with the kids to protect them and the Minicon from the Decepticons. Then the Decepticons make base camp in the crashed remains of a Minicon ship on Earth's moon, scanning new vehicle modes for themselves en route. And this is where we get into the difference in naming of the Japanese and American versions of the characters. So Optimus Prime is normally called Grand Convoy, or simply just Convoy, in the Japanese end of Transformers. Hotshot was called Hot Rod because he was sort of a halfway point between G1 Hot Rod / Rodimus Prime and Bumblebee, with a few elements of Cheetor from Beast Wars thrown in as the red and yellow Kid Appeal character of the series. Red Alert was called Ratchet in Japan, although he was called First Aid in the Transformers Cybertron series when that was released in Japan. Then you've got Demolisher, who was called Ironhide in his original form and Iron Tread in his dump truck form from Transformers Energon, which, if you ask me, is kind of a wrong way round because he doesn't have treads in his dump truck form, only in his tank form. Cyclonus was called Sandstorm, which is confusing because there was also an Autobot called Sandstorm that turned into a helicopter in the original 80 series. Megatron was just called Megatron. Starscream was just called Starscream. Sideways was called Doubleface because of the fact that he has two minicons that turn into helmets that give him different faction symbols for espionage and whatnot. Scavenger was called Devastar, which was the Japanese spelling of Devastator, the combined form of the G1 Constructicons. Let's see now. Blur was called Silverbolt, presumably because of his high-speed silver-coated vehicle mode. And Overload was called Ultra Magnus in Japan, a name that slipped through to the English dub in one of the Optimus Prime Jetfire Overload combinations toward the end of the series. Because Jetfire was the first of the sentient Autobots to be able to combine onto Optimus Prime, apart from obviously the shuttle carrier trailer piece Overload turning to his over-the-shoulder double cannons, like the ones you see on the 2002 era Mechagodzilla design. This was, of course, another integration of toy gimmicks in the cartoon. Same with the way the minicons always power link onto certain parts of the Transformer to give them new weapons and such. Such as, for example, Jolt the helicopter plugging onto Hotshot's backside to reveal the Axel Zuka being over-the-shoulder bazooka thing made from his rear wheels. And Red Alert's handgun thing that could also spring up as a shoulder cannon being activated when his minicon partner Long Arm attaches to his backpack piece and such like. So, as I mentioned before, there were 3 trios of minicons that could turn into weapons for the other larger Transformers to use. The Skyboom Shield was made from a race team minicons, Downshift, Dirtboss and Mirage, who first appeared around the same time as Blur and Sideswipe. And then there was the Star Saber Sword, which was not to be confused with the Autobot called Star Saber from the original Japanese Generation 1 cartoon Transformers timeline. But yes, the Star Saber Sword was formed from 3 jets forming the air defense minicon team of Sonar, Jetstorm and Runway, who would later receive a sort of Skywarp style black and purple and gold colour scheme as the Air Assault minicon team in the toy line, based on their evil Decepticon corrupted form from the Dreamwave tie-in comics. Then, of course, there was also the Requiem Blaster, the space team, consisting of Astroscope, Skyblast and Payload. The Requiem Blaster was the weapon Megatron used to kill Smokescreen during an invasion of the Autobot headquarters, which was the reason Smokescreen got rebuilt into Hoist, which in my opinion was a rather lazy way of retconning a new toy as the same character as you've already grown to love from the cartoon and such. Scavenger started out as a mercenary of sorts, feeding false information to both the Autobots and Decepticons about minicon locations and trying to teach Hotshot how to wield the Star Saber Sword with more respect and responsibility and such like. Before it was revealed he was actually an old friend of Optimus Prime's in that timeline and was an Autobot all along. I suppose they only had him work temporarily with the Decepticons because of his Japanese namesake in the original cartoon being obviously the Constructicons combined form. So, like I say, the Autobots' human allies were Rad, Alexis and Carlos, although 2 of their high school bullies, Fred and Billy, would later join the Autobots as well later on. And this is also the first appearance of an Autobot version of Laserbeak, because for those who don't know, Laserbeak is normally Soundwave's main condor-shaped cassette drone minion, who is basically the second most loyal Decepticon apart from Soundwave himself. Loyal not only to Soundwave, but to Megatron personally as well, having landed on Megatron's arm directly in the 86 movie and all. But This version of Laserbeak is a blue and safety orange early 2000s camcorder video recorder thing with multiple lenses that turns into a little bird thing, and can also be used as a stun gun taser thing to temporarily disorient any attacking Decepticons or Minicons. There have been some instances where the Autobots' human allies have tried to get the Minicons away from a Decepticon influence on their own without the help of the Autobots. And Highwire also happens to be a part of a trio of Minicons that can also combine into a larger Minicon called Perceptor, along with Sure Shock and Grindor. Highwire, Sure Shock and Grindor can also transform into the vehicles the kids use, with Sure Shock becoming Alexis's moped, Grindor becoming Carlos's skateboard, and Highwire becoming Rad's dirt bike type of thing. These Minicon names will also be reused, as well as several other names, throughout Transformers Energon and Cybertron as the names of other characters, which I'll touch on in other videos down the line. Now, because of the hasty release of the English dub and the rushing of animation and such like with this series, Armada is rife with both animation and dubbing errors. In the English dub, there's a lot of character names that get misused and thrown around a lot, like for example, Optimus Prime's Minicon partner Sparkplug has been named Sure Shock, Grindor, Highwire, and Leader One, among other things, over the course of the series. And the same applies to Megatron's partner, Leader One, who has also been misnamed a few times. So, that more or less concludes my look back at Transformers Armada. Not the best of Transformers cartoons from the early 2000s, but still a favourite of mine compared to the likes of Cyberverse and whatever the hell they were doing with BotBots. Anyway, my next animation review was going to be, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, but due to the recent result of my community tab post on the channel, my next animation review will instead be the 2015 Danger Mouse reboot. And full disclosure, I haven't even watched all the way through Friendship is Magic yet for full comparison and such like. So, I've been Soundblaster1987, thanks again for watching. My next toy review will be the 5.5-inch scale Dalek Sack from the Doctor Who toy line, and after that will be my Danger Mouse animation review. Till then, till all are one.